What up, Interverse? Josh here from Polymathics, the YouTube channel that helps you become a modern day Renaissance man. And today we're here talking about the hero's journey, also known as the monomyth. Now, the reason why I decided to do this video is because many people are not aware of what the hero's journey or the monomyth is. You may not even be aware. And if that's the case, that's a good thing, because today I'm going to tell you what it is. And the reason why it's so important is because people go through daily life and they have no idea of the heavy influence that the hero's journey and the monomyth has had throughout history and throughout our culture and our society, and the effects that it has on our psyche every single day as we go through our lives. So because of that, like I said, I decided to do this video, but today's just going to be a brief overview. There's no way I can cover everything that's involved that encompasses the monomyth today. So what I intend on doing is doing a whole series on the monomyth, breaking it down into very advanced videos talking about all different in-depth kind of subjects. But today we're going to talk about three main things. First, what is the monomyth? What is its origins, its history? Second, what is it comprised of? What are the main components? And then third, what are some things in everyday life that you could use it for? Why is it important to you now? So now that you have an idea of what we're talking about, let's just jump right into topic number one, which is, what is the monomyth? And the best place to start is to analyze the word itself. The Greek roots, mono, meaning one, and myth, meaning story, come together to create a word that means the one story. And the connotation is that throughout history, ever since the beginning of time, there has always been deeply ingrained in our minds the sense of one story with very distinct beats, distinct points that it follows that we all relate to on a subconscious, deep psychological level. That when we see the symbols, whether it's a character or it's a situation, we automatically relate to it from things that are just deeply ingrained in our psyche. And this is all of this information came to light from various professors and academics throughout time, but the one who really popularized it was a man named Joseph Campbell. He was a professor of mythology. He studied myths from across the world and fairy tales, and before he died, he was trying to put together this just giant, I don't know if you would call it encyclopedia, but like a repository of every single myth that had ever been created. But his life's goal was to analyze the old stories and identify what the science was behind it. And what he found was that from our most ancient stories, one of the most ancient civilization that we know of, ancient Sumeria, one of the oldest stories is the epic story of Gilgamesh, where he and his kind of new friend that he makes, Enkidu, go off on this adventure, sneak into the god's palace, and they end up going across the ocean, finding the secret to long life, and then trying to bring it back to where they were. And that story, along with so many others from the Bible and ancient Chinese texts, the Arabian Nights also follows the monomyth. So the point is, there's this template, and even though the stories are wildly different, they each follow very main beats of the story. And these main beats are symbolic of things that humankind constantly has to go through, these rituals, these traditions, these initiations into life, into survival, into learning new things and becoming more enlightened to the world around us. So essentially, that's what the monomyth is. It's like this template that for stories that's been going on throughout time. But the one thing to note here is it's not just for old stories. If you look at all of the most popular stories, popular movies from Hollywood, they all follow the monomyth almost to a T. Harry Potter, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Hunger Games, just to name a few. If you look at them, some of them were purposely based off of the monomyth, and some of them just happen to, like the Lord of the Rings, follow it very well because J.R.R. Tolkien also was very deeply immersed and engrossed in mythology, and he just innately understood that these were basic things that made a good story. So that's point number one, which is the history and origins of the monomyth. Now let's talk about what are the components of the monomyth? What comprises the monomyth? And what I want you to imagine, the way Chris Vogler describes it in his book, The Writer's Journey. By the way, Chris Vogler is he's like a screenwriter for Hollywood. He's worked on projects like The Lion King and several different Disney movies. And what he does is he evaluates scripts and kind of tries to identify where the plot holes are, or where the issues are with the story. And he also identified early on that the monomyth was a key component to not just telling stories, as in books and novels, but to telling good, to giving good quality blockbusters in Hollywood. And so the way he describes it is, imagine a baseball diamond, where at first your hero is at home. Well, that's his ordinary world, and then in the first step, he is going to be separated from the ordinary world. He's going to accept the call to adventure and be separated from the ordinary world, and he has to cross a threshold into what's called the special world. And when he crosses that threshold into the special world, he now has to go through what's called initiation. And during initiation, if you can imagine first base to second base, the hero is going through several trials and tribulations and facing several obstacles, trying to learn the rules of the new world and things like that. And then right around second base, the hero is going to have to face what's called like the dragon battle, where he achieves the ultimate boon. Now, the ultimate boon can be a physical thing, like an item of power, or it can also be a lesson that's learned. So, for example, this is a very, easy example. When Prometheus steals the fire from the gods, the fire is the boon. And the fire represents not only a physical object, not only power, but also a type of enlightenment. Because for early man, fire it was a lesson that allowed us to broaden our civilization and our society. So then then what happens is, once he has the boon, now he has to return to the normal world to share that knowledge and that power with the rest of the world. Because whatever the boon was, it's something that the world has been missing, that the world needs, something that the world has forgotten over time. So then the hero has to basically kind of escape and then return back to they have to return back to their normal world. And in order to do that, they have to cross the threshold again. And there is normally where, like, that final climactic moment where they face the ultimate enemy and win the day. They destroy the Death Star, and then they're free to live again. That's when they come back home to the diamond, home run, whatever you want to call it. So that's the way Chris Vogler kind of describes it in his book. But essentially, that's the hero's journey. It's in that sense, you could think of it as 4 steps, but it's really a 3-act type of structure. And although there's only 3 acts, 3 major movements, depending on what scholar you look at, most will say there's anywhere from 12 to 18 distinct, very different beats that have to happen as you're going along this journey. And each one of those beats is very, again, deeply seated in our psyche. And these are things that Joseph Campbell brought up in his book that have been studied through psychoanalytics, which, for those of you that aren't familiar, that's Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud's the one who created psychoanalytics. And so these are things that are deeply ingrained in human psyche. And the point is, when you see them, you immediately identify with them. Now, another thing, and this is more towards Carl Jung's part of the psychoanalytics, is that there are some distinct archetypes, character archetypes, that are in most monomyths, that are in most hero journeys. And just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, the mentor is one. So Yoda and Gandalf the Grey and Haymitch from Hunger Games, those are all mentors. You also have the hero, of course. Every hero's journey has to have a hero, and that's the person who's going to go outside of the normal world into the special world, receive the boon or retrieve the boon, and then bring it back. You also have the antagonist, the villain, etc., etc. So the point is that the hero's journey is comprised of a 3-act structure, which can then be broken down into about 18 beats on top of, or in addition to, very identifiable archetypes, character archetypes. And that is what comprises the hero's journey, the monomyth itself. That's point number 2. Now, if we're going to move to the last point, point number 3, which is, what are some everyday uses for the monomyth? I'm not going to go over all of them. I'm going to go over the basics and then kind of allude to some things that I'd like to talk about in future videos. So I think it's obvious by now that anybody who is a storyteller can benefit from studying the monomyth. And when I say storyteller, I mean this very loosely. I'm being very liberal about this. This could be the mother who tells her children stories at night to kind of, get their minds thinking and their creativity thinking. Or it could be a songwriter. It could be a poet. Of course, it could be a novelist or a short story writer. But it could also be someone who has to give speeches to small or large audiences. And the recommendation here isn't to use an 18-act structure when you're giving a 5-minute speech, but if you have to tell a story, which most good speakers do, then what you'll want to use are archetypes and easily identifiable situations where, as soon as you mention 2 trolls standing at a bridge, the subconscious identifies them as threshold guardians. And they already know, with very little cue, or with very few cues, they already understand what the situation entails and what is at stake. And then so speaking, and then the other thing, and I'll leave you with this, my ideas on where the monomyth is really could be used. Well, it can also be used great for identifying gaps in stories and in movies and things like that. But if my channel, this channel, as I said in the beginning, is all about becoming a modern day Renaissance man, a polymath, reaching your full potential. And the monomyth is a great template to take a look at your previous experiences and look at the hero's journeys that you yourself have already gone on in the story of your own life and identify what lessons you've already learned. But not only that, going forward, to be able to use a similar template to where, if you know that you're either being called on an adventure right now or you plan on going on an adventure, that there's sort of a template that gives you an idea of what to expect and what you need. For example, many people who give advice on business, who give advice on starting your own business and doing anything, one of the first things they'll tell you is find a mentor. And one of the first steps in the monomyth is that the hero finds a mentor. The other thing is facing obstacles, right? And throughout the hero's journey, a hero must face appropriate obstacles that will teach them the lessons that they'll need to bring back to the real world, to share with the rest of the tribe. And I believe that if you look at it from a very figurative point of view, that the hero's journey can be used as a method of teaching yourself new things and coming to new enlightenment. And so let me give you an example, because that may sound like kind of woo-woo or out there. Let me give you an example so it's tangible and you can understand. Something that I relate with is when I was a young kid, and there are several teenagers out there right now every single day that are going through this, that they decide to accept the call to adventure and they join the military. And they're taken out of their normal world and they're thrown into this special world with new rules and new regulations and several challenges and obstacles that they have to face. And through that, they sharpen their abilities and their tools that they can use, and they learn lessons that, whether they serve 2 years or 20 years, at some point they can take those lessons back into the world, the ordinary world in which they came, and use them and share them with their friends, their families, their colleagues, to make the world better and to be a more fully realized and actualized person. So that's what I mean. That's my point for point number 3. There's a lot of real world application that the monomyth has. But it's been 17 minutes. I think I've spoken enough. If you're still with me and you think that this topic is interesting, if you think it's going to be valuable, then please, first of all, give me a like. But secondly, go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, because what's going to happen is, as I do more videos on in-depth, advanced parts of the monomyth, they're going to come right to your YouTube, and you'll be notified right away. So anyways, hope that this was helpful. Hope that it kind of gave you a good insight and overview into what the hero's journey is all about. And I hope to see you later. But until next time, take it easy.